Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us here today to get an update on the Otway Basin 3D Marine Seismic Survey. My name's Tanya Johnston, and I look after TGS's business here in Australia. And I have with me Dan Govia from SLR Consulting, who has led the team in the preparation of the Environment Plan. And I'll hand over to him to introduce himself.
Well, thanks, Tanya. Good evening, everyone. Dan Govia here, SLR Consulting. As Tanya said, we've been supporting TGS with the preparation of the Environment Plan and some of the recent changes that we've made to the plan, which we'll be going through this evening. So Tanya will start off, and then I will come in after Tanya and provide some updates on some of the changes to the Environment Plan, as well as a bit of a summary on the activities proposed. Thanks, Tanya.
Thanks, Dan. So the purpose of the webinar today is to give an update on the changes to the project since the Environment Plan was made available for public comment. You'll notice that microphones and cameras are disabled, but there will be a Q&A session after the presentation. But please raise your questions at any time and we will review and answer these at the end. So you can do this through the Q&A tab, which is at the top of the meeting. And for your information, this webinar will be recorded, as we understand that not everybody can make it. So this will be available on our website after the webinar. And please feel free to contact us at any time with additional queries after the webinar. So TGS would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and sea country. We recognise their continuing connection to the land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So to start with, I'd just like to cover a little bit about who TGS is. So TGS provides data and intelligence and other specialised services across the energy mix. This includes data and insights for oil and gas exploration, wind, solar and carbon capture. TGS has extensive experience with over 40 years of expertise. We're committed to sustainability and are industry leading in ESG performance. We are also committed to Energeo's Sustainable Seas initiative, where we remove marine debris and ghost nets from the marine environment. You could read more about TGS and our sustainability initiatives in our sustainability report on the TGS website. You'll find a link to this from the TGS Otway website, which will show you how to get to that later at the end of the presentation. So the outline, welcome and introduction, we've done that. So we'll now cover off on the TGS Otway Basin 3D Marine Seismic Project overview. We'll go through changes to the project, the current status, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. And this is just the housekeeping again. I went through it earlier, so I've disabled microphones and cameras. There's a Q&A session. You can ask questions at any time. Do that through the Q&A chat. The webinar is being recorded and will be available from the Otway TGS website. And please contact TGS if you have any additional queries following the webinar at otway@tgs.com. Okay, and now I'm going to hand over to Dan, who will go through the proposed activity.
Cool, thanks, Tanya. So yeah, just wanting to provide an overview of the activities which TGS are proposing, which they are applying for in the Environment Plan. So as has already been stated, and I'm sure you're well aware, it's a 3D marine seismic survey. There's no drilling or extraction of any minerals involved in any of the activities proposed. Basically, the objectives of the survey are to acquire geophysical data beneath the seabed so that there can be an understanding of the underlying geology through the Otway area, the Otway region. So the survey area is located in deep offshore Commonwealth waters. It's a temporary activity. There's going to be no fixed or permanent equipment as part of the survey. The vessel and the seismic array will be constantly moving throughout the area during the survey. And at this stage, pending regulatory approval, TGS would intend to start in Q4 this year, 2024, and the duration of the environment plan that has been applied for is until the end of 2027. So just some of the details on the survey. So this is the survey area on the image that you can see there. The wider area, the black polygon there, is the operational area. So that is the area where all activities will take place in terms of vessel manoeuvring, where the equipment will be deployed, as well as retrieved, and any maintenance that needs to be undertaken on any of the equipment while it's on standby. And then within that, the red polygon is what's called the active source area. So that's the only area that the acoustic source can be active. In addition to that active source area, there's two tie lines. You can see them on the map there. They're the two going up to the north, two red lines there. They represent single lines which connect the main survey area to two previously drilled wells, and that's to correlate the data from that has been received from that drilling program into the seismic data, and then it allows the two data sets to be aligned, and whoever is analysing the data can understand what they're seeing from the seismic data as opposed to what was actually logged from down the well. There's some distances on there to provide a bit of an indication of where it is. So the distances shown are of the operational area. So bearing in mind the source won't be active there, it's just where the vessel could be. So the closest points to land there, so that top one with Portland, it's 45 kilometres. That's to the nearest point of land, 45 kilometres. It's actually 51 kilometres to Portland itself. 61 kilometres to Warrnambool, 61 from King Island, and then in Tasmania, Arthur River is 85 kilometres. So just again reiterating that the actual survey area will be again further from that and won't be visible from shore either. So the active source area, which is the red polygon, water depths in that are largely greater than 1,500 metres apart from those two tie lines, and extends down to just over 5,600 metres. So very deep offshore water. So this is an image of a typical seismic survey. So there's the seismic vessel on the top of the middle of that image there. And just to point out, the seismic vessel is not known at the moment. It hasn't been confirmed. In addition, with the main seismic vessel, the fleet that would be out there, there'd be another 3 supporting vessels with it as well. So obviously smaller than the main seismic vessel. The speed of the vessel, as I said earlier, it's constantly moving, 4 to 5 knots. So that's 7.5 to 9.5 kilometres an hour that it'll be moving through the survey area. Behind the vessel, there's 3 seismic sources or acoustic sources. You can see those 3 lines there. The maximum that they can be is an equivalent of 3,500 cubic inch. And that's what has been modelled in the modelling report. So to put that in perspective, it's not a large source. I've seen surveys many years ago up over 6,000 cubic inches. So it's a balance between obviously achieving the objectives of the survey, so being able to see below the seabed, but as well as minimising the noise that's put out into the marine environment. So that's by no means a large acoustic source which has been used here. So behind the vessel is what's called the streamers. So I'll try and hold it up so you can see it. So this here is what a streamer is. This is an actual piece of streamer from a seismic vessel. So it's got a plastic outer sheath, and then on the inside it's foam filled, and then the little hole on the inside is where the wires are. So along those wires at set points along the streamer is hydrophones. And so these streamers are the listening devices. So the reflected sound waves which come up from the layers from the seabed and but not below the seabed get picked up in the streamers and then transferred to the computers on board the seismic vessel. So for the environment plan that's been applied for, TGS are considering up to 14 streamers. These could be 10 kilometres long. The average spacing is normally somewhere around 120 metres. So that based on 14 streamers equates to a spread of 1,560 metres wide by 10 kilometres long. Most of that length is under the water, so they're not visible, but there's buoys on the front and there's buoys on the end. So the buoys on the end, they have AIS responders on them, they have radar reflectors as well as lights, so they're visible day and night. They have turtle guards on them, so any marine fauna can't get trapped on them, and it marks the end of the array, and it can also show up on AIS systems as well. On each of those streamers, there's self-recovery devices as well. So if it, for any reason it got severed or broke and started sinking to the seabed, they're set at a certain distance and then they will recover back to the surface themselves, and then to ensure that they don't sink to the seabed. I think that's it for that one. So just wanted to provide a bit of an overview of some of the key control measures for marine mammals. Just wanted to run through, just got a couple of slides of a few of the key measures. Most of these were in the initial EP that was submitted. There are a couple of additions, but we'll point those out when we get to the updates later on the next few slides. So there will be marine fauna observers on board the main seismic vessel. So marine fauna observers during daylight hours, observing for marine mammals, seeing whether the respective species are within the relevant shutdown zones. And there will also be 2 supporting vessels, which will have 2 marine fauna observers on each as well. So they will help implement the control measures and ensure there's no marine mammals in the shutdown zones while the acoustic source is active. In addition to those observers, there'll also be passive acoustic monitoring system on board the main seismic vessel. There's passive acoustic monitoring observers, which will be running that over running shifts to ensure that is running 24 hours a day. So that listens to the communications from whales or dolphins that are made, and then it shows up on a screen and they can determine what species and how far away, direction, etc. as well. The startup procedures in place before the acoustic source can be active, before the survey starts. So the startup procedures, so what that is, it's a pre-observation watch. So for a period of 30 minutes, the observers, marine fauna observers, are looking out and seeing whether they can see any marine mammals within the relative shutdown zones. The reason that's determined to be 30 minutes is to allow for any diving marine mammals that are diving below the surface to have come up as well and to be seen. So that's why before they start that period of time. If there's no marine fauna observed within that 30 minutes, it then starts a soft start. And what a soft start is the acoustic source is slowly increased in source volume. So the noise will slowly start being increased, and that occurs over a period of 30 minutes. And what that allows for is if there's any species in the area that are not comfortable with noise, they will also move away slowly. Again, if any marine mammal comes into a shutdown zone or is sighted within that period, the acoustic source is stopped, and then those startup procedures have to start again once they've been seen to leave the relative shutdown zones. So the 2 main species of interest through the area are obviously the pygmy blue whales and the southern right whales. A shutdown zone of 7 kilometres will be in place. So that means any pygmy blue whale or southern right whale which is seen within 7 kilometres, and that's, again, as I mentioned before, will be helped to be administered by the supporting vessels and the observers on there. The acoustic source will shut down. For all other whales, the shutdown zone is 2 kilometres. So these distances have been verified and justified from the sound modelling, which has been undertaken by JASCO. The other shutdown zone, which is a new one, and I'll mention that again later, is there'll be a 100-metre shutdown zone in place for dolphins. So those shutdown zones are from the acoustic source, not the vessel, from the acoustic source. If a pygmy blue whale is seen within that shutdown zone and the source shuts down, the vessel will relocate to a distance 32 kilometres away before then starting up the soft start and the pre-observational watch, etc. Likewise, for a southern right whale, if it's an adult only or a pair of adults and a shutdown occurs, the vessel will relocate 11 kilometres. However, if a calf is present with a southern right whale and results in a shutdown, the vessel will relocate 42 kilometres. The reason those distances differ is based on the sound modelling. So JASCO undertook animat sound modelling. So that's focused specifically on the hearing receptors of those species. It's very detailed within the sound modelling report on the environment plan. So I won't go into any further details here, but it is justified. The modelling which has been undertaken by JASCO has also been verified many times. There's published literature to show that the modelling is robust. They've undertaken different modelling scenarios for different size, volume acoustic sources and different water depths and different basins and different seasons. And they've deployed hydrophones to verify whether the modelling that was undertaken was correct. And in most cases, or all cases, it was shown that it was conservative. And there's a number of papers which have been written up to verify that as well. So we're fairly confident that the modelling that's been undertaken is conservative, and that allows us to base the threshold distances and assessments within the environment plan. Some of the adaptive management measures that are in place relate to if multiple sightings of either pygmy blue whale or southern right whales are seen and they result in a shutdown. If there's more than 3 shutdowns within a 48-hour period, the vessel will relocate, obviously as I said above. Nighttime operations will cease, and then normal operations can only resume again after 24 hours of no shutdowns due to marine mammals. So some of the key changes to the survey and which have been included in the environment plan, which will be resubmitted, is TGS have listened to relevant persons and they've made some additional changes to ensure that the survey will avoid, mitigate, minimise impacts to the relevant person's functions, interests and activities. So there's been a reduction in the survey area to the first version. There's also been some changes in terminology, but those changes are just made to make it simpler and more understandable in terms of the different activities which will occur in the 2 different areas. So the active source area is the red polygon there. That is the area where the source will be active. That has moved further offshore. So before it was called the acquisition area, and that was where the red hatched area is shown on that image there. So now that red hatched image is no longer going to have or can have an active acoustic source. That's moved further away from the biological important areas of the pygmy blue whale and the southern right whale. It's also moved further away from most of the commercial fishing activities. Those tan polygons that you can see there, they're now excluded apart from this one short line which runs through it. That's an orange roughy research area as well. So a lot of this has come from just feedback which has been received, and TGS has moved the whole area further offshore to avoid conflict. So for the southern right whales, on that image there, there's the tan area right along the coastline. So that's the biological area where they go for reproduction. They are very coastal when they come in there. Using the modelling results, we put a buffer around that biological important area. So the buffer based on the modelling results based on a calf being present, i.e. the most sensitive life stage, was 42 kilometres. So the survey area, the active source area and the operational area have been, again, moved further offshore to avoid any overlap with that, that buffer and the biological important area. and we are confident now that these measures and changes and moving further offshore will completely protect the southern right whales from any effects from the survey. For the blue whales, they've got a foraging biological important area that's shown there through the tan coloured area. That's the high annual use area. Again, moving the survey area further offshore significantly reduced the overlap with that buffer. So the buffer that was put on around that is 16 kilometres, again, based on the modelling. So that ensures that any noise levels that may go into that area won't have any effect on their activities that they're undertaking, i.e. their feeding. The only overlap there is are the two tie lines. And some measures will be in place there to again avoid any potential impacts or effects through that area. So they won't be acquired during the peak foraging season, which through literature and talking to relevant marine mammal experts has been considered to be January to April inclusive. When those two lines are acquired, they'll be acquired during daylight hours. It won't take long to acquire them, and there'll be two support vessels with the marine fauna observers on board out in front of the seismic vessel while those two tie lines are being acquired. So, as I mentioned earlier, there'll be 3 support vessels along with the seismic vessel. There'll be marine fauna observers on the main seismic vessel, and then on 2 of those supporting vessels, there will be marine fauna observers as well. So this has been introduced to ensure that there'll always be one support vessel dedicated to marine mammal observations during the survey, apart from or in addition to the seismic vessel as well. And then the other one that I mentioned earlier around the dolphins, there's now a shutdown zone of 100 metres included for dolphins as well. So I mentioned it earlier, the initial environment plan that was submitted had an acquisition area. So on the left there, you can see the light blue polygon is the acquisition area. This, in the definitions of the environment plan, was the area where the data could be acquired. The seismic data could be acquired. It was a much larger area. However, TGS have refined the area of where the survey will be. We've now changed the name. And the only change of the name is just to make it more representative of what will actually be happening. So the active source area defines the area where that source can be active. So again, it's much smaller and it has moved further offshore. So you can see on the right there, that is now the area that will be in the environment plan that is resubmitted to NOPSEMA. So current status of the environment plan, it has been submitted to NOPSEMA for their assessment. A request for further information was provided from NOPSEMA wanting some further information. We're working through that now. Some of the key changes that we've just run through are the main changes there that they were after, and just a bit more certainty around that, and which we've done. The plan is to resubmit the environment plan back to NOPSEMA in early June. So in terms of where can you find more information? So TGS now, they've got a dedicated TGS Otway website, and it's a form of an information hub. You can see the link there, which is provided on your screen. And it manages all the data, provides all the reports and information which is supporting the environment plan, the timelines, frequently asked questions. It's a good source of information if you wanted to find out more about the environment plan, the survey, TGS, etc. In addition to that dedicated website, there's also social media platforms. So a Facebook page has been set up, as well as a LinkedIn page as well. So they're both under the name TGS Otway, if you want to have a look on those platforms for further information and regular updates on timing, information, etc. will be updated on there as well. In addition, TGS have also established a new portal to help with the liaising with commercial fishing industry and just ensuring that the two different industries can coexist in the Otway region. So yeah, TGS are working closely with the commercial fishers in the region as well. So just to provide a bit of an update on some drop-in sessions which TGS are holding through coastal Victoria and over in Tasmania. So 28th, basically end of May, start of June, through Portland, Port Fairy, Warrnambool, Polo Bay, Hobart. There will be drop-in sessions and TGS representatives will be available, can provide information on the proposed activity, have an opportunity to ask any questions. The venues and timing, etc., are still being finalised at the moment. They are nearly done. Once they are finalised and the schedule has been confirmed, they will be emailed out to all the relevant persons with the venues and times, etc. And likewise, you can also find it on the TGS dedicated website, the TGS Otway website, the Facebook and LinkedIn pages as well. So again, if you've got any questions that we don't get through, or if you think of them afterwards, make sure you can email them through there at otway@tgs.com. And as Tanya said, if you have any questions, you can put them into the Q&A at the top there and we will run through them. If we don't get through them all, we will provide a response later and they'll be provided on the TGS Otway website as well. Anything else, Tanya, before we take any questions from you?
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Dan. And I guess today we'll be answering questions that are relevant to the Environment Plan and also the updates to the Environment Plan. Other questions we're happy to answer, and as Dan says, we'll make those available on the TGS Otway page. But we'll recap all the questions on that page. Just as we work through the questions, there may be some silences from us when we're reading through them. So we'll get round to answering them. It's just that we're reading the questions. So I thank you for your understanding on that. The first question that came through was, at what date was the resizing of the operational area decided on? Was it before or after March 8th, 2024? So the final decision on redesigning or resizing the area, the active source area, and the operational area was later in March. So it was after we received the RFI.
Cool. I'll jump in. Sorry, Tanya, if you finished. I'll jump into one. There's a question there around the levels of exposure to noise, or what actual level of exposure to noise is harmful given the hearing damage is permanent. So within the Environment Plan and also the sound modelling report is a very detailed assessment where permanent threshold shift and temporary threshold shift have been assessed and they've been considered, and those distances have been incorporated into shutdown zones. And the other thing to remember, so I won't go into it here, there's a lot of information on there, but all the shutdown zones and the measures that are in place have been incorporated to prevent any harm to marine mammals, especially by moving further away offshore as well. So yeah, there's a lot of information which is backed up and validated and supported by literature as well. Now there's a question here about what happens to the species that cannot be viewed by observers on the vessels. Not sure what species are being referred to there. In terms of marine mammals, passive acoustic monitoring is in place for that, to listen to the communications that are made. The other thing to point out, as I said earlier, that the vessel is continuously moving. So it's not in an area for any particular time, and the assessments that we've undertaken, because of the speed of the vessel moving at that 4 to 5 knots, will not result in any cumulative impact on any species which will cause harm, because it's a continuously moving noise. Likewise, the water depth. The water depth is very deep as well.
And then there's one here. So the area affected is no longer 5.5 million hectares. So with the reduction in the operational area is now 49,000 square kilometres, and the active source area 31,700 square kilometres. It's important to note, though, that we've made a commitment to acquire a maximum of 15,000 within that active source area.
There's a question here on the pygmy blue whale foraging season, and that Dr. Peter Gill has stated that it can last into May. TGS has had a number of meetings with Peter Gill. He's well aware of the project. He has reviewed the control measures, and extensive amount of time has been going into the peak season. They can be seen in May, correct? But the peak season we've determined to be into April. Bearing in mind the survey has moved further offshore, so there's actually no overlap apart from those tie lines, where additional controls will be put in place. So based on the control measures, avoiding those areas, moving further offshore, we're confident that there will be no harm to those blue whales in the area. There's a question around JASCO's modelling regarding impacts to zooplankton. So the modelling that's been done, and again, as I said earlier, we've got confidence in the modelling based on that it has been verified using the literature on the different thresholds for the different species. And there's marine mammals, there's fish, there's fish eggs, there's zooplankton, etc. So we are confident on those effects. There's a reference to the Macaulay paper showing impacts out to 1.2 kilometres. We have met with Rob Macaulay as part of this program, and we've spoken about his study. Since he carried out his study, there were a couple of other studies undertaken, which were initiated after that. There was a few gaps identified in the Macaulay paper, some shortcomings in terms of replication and size and duration of the survey. And I understand they're wanting to do further studies to validate that. In the environment plan, I won't go too much into the impacts on the zooplankton and all of that. There's an extensive summary within the environment plan on zooplankton. TGS have been asked additional questions on this, which TGS has provided answers. Effectively, the modelling that's been undertaken has used noise exposure criteria, and we're confident that the assessment in the environment plan is robust. Yes, there's potential for a very localized and temporary impact on zooplankton, but it won't be long lasting. The area has a high refresh rate. There's a lot of current moving through the area. So there's not going to be large areas where there's no plankton. It's continuously moving. It's a high energy marine environment, and we expect the population recovery of those species to be within days based on the assessment. So effectively the summary, which is in the environment plan, is that the impacts will be localised, they'll be temporary, and they are recoverable. There's a question here regarding how does the environment plan account for species that cannot move out of the operational area during a soft start, such as southern rock lobster, scallops, and abalone? As I said right at the start, the water depths of the survey area, the active source area, are greater than 1,500 metres for most of the area. So those species are unlikely to be living in those water depths. They're in much shallower water.
So here's a question. Weekday during work hours is a hard time for many people to attend. Would you consider holding the sessions after 5 p.m? I guess the session is at 6 p.m, but the sessions are recorded as well. So, and so anybody can listen to them, and also welcome to email any queries to TGS as they arise. And then can you explain what an RFI is, please? So that's a letter that we get from NOPSEMA, which is a request for further written information. So that's what we're working through at the moment.
There's a question around that TGS have changed the scope and the scale of the project, and that to provide relevant persons sufficient information to consult on this project, when will we be issuing an updated EP? So if I'm reading this question correctly, so in terms of the scope and the scale of the project, there's been a reduction in the scale of the project. It's moved further away from sensitivities. It's removed a lot of conflict and overlap with commercial fishers. It's moved further away from the coast. It's moved further away and also avoids the biological important areas. So the scale and scope by definition hasn't increased, which is the requirement in an NOPSEMA for it to be reissued. So it's reduced the impact, so it doesn't need to go out for public consultation. NOPSEMA will be assessing it once it's resubmitted.
It will be available on NOPSEMA's website once we do resubmit it to NOPSEMA.
Yeah.
And then we've got, can you provide a more high resolution map for the operational area and active source area than what was provided in the information sheet emailed with the notification of this webinar? It is particularly low resolution map and hard to interpret. Yeah, we can put a copy of higher resolution map on the TGS Otway website. And actually there's already a map on the website. So what was the reason that NOPSEMA sent the EP back to TGS on the 8th of March, and when will it be expected would be a public announcement on the decision on the project? So we plan on addressing the request for further written information from NOPSEMA that we received on the 8th of March, and we plan on resubmitting that in June. So it's anticipated that we will hear back from NOPSEMA 30 days after we have resubmitted the environment plan.
There's a question here that researchers suggest the modelling is flawed because it relies heavily on laboratory modelling. Who has verified your research? So as I said earlier, so JASCO, international acousticians, they're highly regarded worldwide for the reports and the work they deliver. They undertook the modelling. They have got extensive amount of published literature with in-field recordings of seismic surveys comparing back to the results of the modelling. So it has been verified. So I think that, and part of working with NOPSEMA, they want to ensure that obviously the modelling is robust and the firms that are undertaking it, NOPSEMA, are well aware of JASCO's work. They have been provided as part of the application links, and it's all supporting in the reference list of the modelling of their published papers which back up that. So again, it's in the modelling report, which you can access through the TGS Otway website as well.
There's a question here. So to be clear, there will be a new EP, just not provided to relevant persons. And no, there won't be a new EP. It has just been amended with the amendments that we've gone through today.
Tanya, is it worth giving just an update on that reduction of the operational area and the survey area? Have you got those numbers there?
Yeah, so we went through that before. So the
that was, sorry.
Yeah, and
sorry,
so we've had nearly a 10% reduction in the operational area and a 29% reduction in the active source area. So that's 49,600 square kilometres for the operational area, and active source area 31,700. I guess it's really important to know that like the source can only be active in the active source area, not in the whole operational area.
Cool, thank you.
We have a link on our website to NOPSEMA's process for assessing EPs as well, because there's a few questions around the assessment process. So if you go to the link on the TGS Otway website, then you can see what the assessment process looks like. And so we have a few questions online that's not actually relevant to the environment plan itself and the updates to the environment plan. And like I said, we're happy to answer those questions, but we will do that when we recap all the questions from today's session on the website, so you can read them there. So if there's no more questions in regards to the environment plan, then we will leave it there. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time today, and yeah, please feel free to reach out to us on otway@tgs.com email. And like I said, every question that has been answered here, we will answer on our website. We'll have available on our website in a couple of days, along with the recording of the session.